Welcome back to SuperBike Intelligence. If you're new here, pull up a chair. If you've been here a while, you already know how this goes. This isn't a channel about spec sheets, dyno charts, or arguing over horsepower like it's fantasy football. This is where we talk about why motorcycles feel the way they do, why brands mean something to us, and why certain bikes quietly sneak into your soul while everyone else is busy shouting. And today, I want to talk about a brand that almost never shouts. Suzuki. Yeah, that's Suzuki. Not the flashiest, not the loudest on Instagram, not the brand with the most aggressive marketing campaigns or dramatic unveilings. And yet, somehow, Suzuki might just be the smartest brand in motorcycles. Quietly, relentlessly, almost stubbornly so. And I know already, some of you are nodding, some of you are rolling your eyes, and some of you are thinking, here we go, another hot take. Good. That's exactly where I want you. Because this topic matters more than people realize. It cuts straight into rider identity, into ego, into what we think motorcycling should be versus what it actually is when the helmet's on, the engine's warm, and no one's watching. Let me paint a picture. It's early morning, cold air, you roll your bike out of the garage. Maybe the neighbors are still asleep. You thumb the starter. No drama, no fireworks, no theatrical growl meant for TikTok. Just an engine that wakes up like it's done this 1,000 times before. Because it has. That feeling, that quiet confidence, that's Suzuki energy. Suzuki doesn't try to impress you at the dealership. Suzuki tries to impress you 3 years later, 5 years later, on a random Tuesday, when the bike just works. Again. And that's why people feel weirdly strongly about Suzuki, on both sides. Because Suzuki riders don't evangelize the way others do. They don't need to. And critics? They can't quite explain why the bikes refuse to die, refuse to age badly, refuse to let go of their reputation no matter how boring the internet tries to label them. Let's talk about that word for a second. Boring. That's the insult. Always has been. Suzuki is boring, they say. Too safe, too conservative, too behind the curve. But here's the uncomfortable truth no one likes to admit. Boring is often just another word for grown up. Suzuki builds motorcycles like someone who's actually ridden motorcycles for decades. Not like someone chasing trends, not like someone trying to win a marketing war. Like someone who understands what happens after the honeymoon phase. Because here's the thing about motorcycles. Most of your time with them isn't spent at redline. It's spent in traffic, on cold starts, on long rides where your back matters more than your ego, on late nights when you just want to ride without thinking. And Suzuki gets that. Think about how many riders you know who started on a Suzuki, or ended up back on one, or sold everything else and quietly kept the Suzuki in the garage, just in case. That's not an accident. Suzuki has always had this strange, almost blue-collar philosophy. No pretense, no fake prestige, no identity crisis. They don't ask, how do we look? They ask, will this bike still feel right in 5 years? And emotionally, that hits different. Because motorcycling isn't just about excitement, it's about trust. Trust that the bike will start. Trust that it won't punish you for a long day. Trust that it won't turn every ride into a negotiation. Suzuki bikes don't try to dominate you. They partner with you. And that's where the divide begins. Some riders want drama. They want the bike to feel alive, unpredictable, borderline unhinged. They want the motorcycle to challenge them every second. Others, they want something that disappears beneath them. Something that becomes an extension of thought. Something that doesn't demand attention. It earns it. Suzuki has always leaned into that second group. And culturally, that makes Suzuki fascinating. Because Suzuki doesn't sell dreams, they sell relationships. You don't fall in love with a Suzuki in 5 minutes. You grow into it. Slowly, almost accidentally. You start noticing things. The way the throttle responds without surprises. The way the bike settles into a rhythm on the highway. The way it doesn't exhaust you mentally after an hour. And one day you realize you trust it more than bikes you once obsessed over. That's dangerous. For the ego. Because in group rides, Suzuki doesn't dominate conversations, it just keeps up. smoothly, quietly, reliably, and that reliability, it becomes a flex without ever being announced. You know that rider in the group who's never late, never stressed, never troubleshooting some weird issue at the petrol station? Yeah, probably on a Suzuki. And here's where things get interesting. Suzuki doesn't try to emotionally manipulate riders. There's no forced mythology, no artificial rebellion, no lifestyle cosplay. Suzuki's message is simple: ride the damn bike. That's it. And for some people, that feels underwhelming. Because we live in an era where motorcycles are sold as identities first, machines second. You don't just buy a bike anymore, you buy a story, a tribe, a set of hashtags. Suzuki refuses to play that game. And that refusal, it pisses people off. Because Suzuki exposes something uncomfortable, a lot of what we argue about in motorcycles isn't about riding at all. It's about image. Suzuki strips that away. No excuses, no noise, just riding. Think about late night rides, empty roads, streetlights flicking past your visor, no audience, no content, just you and the machine. That's Suzuki territory, no theatrics, just flow. And if you've ever owned one, you know exactly what I mean. Suzuki bikes don't ask for validation. They don't care if you post them. They don't need constant reassurance. They're almost indifferent to your approval, which ironically makes them more confident than brands screaming for attention. Now, let's be honest. Suzuki isn't perfect, and anyone pretending otherwise is lying. Suzuki can feel slow to change, sometimes painfully so. They don't chase innovation the way others do. They don't flood the market with variations and special editions. And yeah, sometimes you wish they'd take more risks. But here's the flip side. When Suzuki does change something, it's because they're sure. Not because Twitter demanded it, not because competitors forced their hand, but because it genuinely improved the riding experience. That patience, that discipline, that's rare. And it's why Suzuki loyalty runs deep, but quiet. Suzuki riders don't shout in comment sections. They don't argue for dominance. They just ride. And when someone criticizes Suzuki, the response isn't anger. It's usually a shrug and a smile. Because Suzuki riders know something others don't. They know what happens when the novelty fades. They know what happens after the first year, after the second, after the third. Suzuki plays the long game, and emotionally, that creates a different kind of bond. It's not obsession, it's respect. It's like an old jacket that doesn't impress anyone, but you'd never throw it away. And that's where Suzuki quietly wins. Not in headlines, not in launch events, but in garages, in memories, in the space between rides. If you've ever stood in your garage late at night, helmet still warm, engine ticking as it cools, you know that feeling. Suzuki understands that moment. They design for that rider. And that's why Suzuki divides people. Because if you measure motorcycles by attention, Suzuki loses. But if you measure them by ownership satisfaction, longevity, trust, Suzuki punches way above its weight. And the smartest part? They're okay with not being everyone's favorite. They don't chase riders who want constant excitement. They build for riders who want consistency. And consistency, real consistency, is underrated until you don't have it. So before you write Suzuki off as boring, ask yourself something. Do you want a bike that impresses you for a month? Or one that supports you for years? Do you want adrenaline or peace? Do you want drama or flow? There's no wrong answer. But Suzuki knows exactly who it's building for. And that clarity, that restraint, that confidence, that's intelligence. Quiet intelligence. If this hit home, or if you completely disagree, I want to hear it. Drop your take in the comments. Suzuki lover, Suzuki skeptic, former owner who swore you'd never go back, and did anyway. The algorithm, we're onto something here. And if you want more unfiltered motorcycle talk without the marketing fluff, you know what to do. Subscribe and stick around. Because motorcycles aren't just machines, they're mirrors. So let me leave you with this. In a world where every brand is shouting to be noticed, what does it say about Suzuki that they don't have to? I'll see you in the comments.